It was a long time ago. Probably almost 10 years now that I had this job. I was a night janitor at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. It was just a temp job. I was only working there for a few months, but I got to know some of the janitors who worked there full time. It's always interesting talking to people who work overnight because, well, there's just not that many of us, you know? So you get to know each other pretty quickly. These guys knew everything about the hospital because they'd been working there forever. And we got along really well. They liked to tell me stories about the place, and they talked about all sorts of crazy stuff they'd seen over the years. But what they liked to talk about most was one particular place. A place that apparently no one was supposed to ever go? A place that to this day I still have nightmares about? Like I said, I worked the night shift, so I got to see parts of the hospital that most people don't ever see. But these guys told me about parts of the hospital that were off limits to everyone. Patients, doctors, nurses, even security guards. They told me that underneath the oldest part of the hospital, there's a series of locked corridors that no one is ever supposed to enter. They call it Ward D. Supposedly. The official story is that it was shut down back in the late 1960s after a series of failed experiments that somehow leaked out of the lab and infected some of the hospital staff. There were rumors that some of the doctors lost their minds, that security guards went insane and started killing each other, and that finally someone set off the fire alarm, and in the chaos that followed, most of the hospital staff either ran away or simply passed out from whatever this thing was that was floating around. The rumor was that the entire ward was sealed off, quarantined, essentially, and no one was supposed to ever go in there again. Of course, I didn't believe any of that, you know? Because this is supposed to be America's best hospital. I mean, they teach people from all over the country to come to Johns Hopkins to learn new surgical techniques and medical technologies. The SYI was kind of surprised one night when I got a call from the head supervisor to come see him in the basement supply closet. The supply closet was located beneath the oldest part of the hospital, which happened to be the same part where they housed Ward D as I descended the stairs into the dim, oil lamp-lit basement. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It felt strange being in this place. It was as if I could feel the very essence of this place, the countless lives hanging in the balance, the constant struggle between life and death that takes place in a place like this. When I reached the supply closet, the head supervisor greeted me with an urgent look on his face. He leaned in close and whispered to me, "There's a water leak coming from the basement pipes below, Ward D. I need you to grab your mop bucket and go check it out." Of course, I agreed, although I couldn't help but notice that the janitor closest to me scoffed audibly and rolled his eyes. After all, if there was one thing we knew about the building, it was that nothing ever leaked from the pipes below Ward D, so what was going on? As I rounded the corner to the staircase leading down to Ward D, I noticed that the air seemed to get colder. As I descended into the darkness, my flashlight flickered to life, revealing the dimly lit concrete corridor before me. I continued deeper into the maze, following the sound of dripping water. The further I went, the dimmer the light from my flashlight became, and soon I was enveloped by an all-consuming blackness that seemed to press against me from all sides. Suddenly, my flashlight sputtered and died, plunging me into absolute darkness. I tried to turn back, but I was disoriented and couldn't find the stairwell. Fear began to creep up on me, whispering insidious doubts in my ear. What if the walls were closing in? What if the room was getting smaller? Was I trapped? Then, I felt it again. That indescribable sensation that I'd felt when entering the corridor. As if the very essence of the hospital was reaching out to me, enveloping me in its embrace. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. I called out into the darkness, my voice echoing eerily through the cavernous space. "Hello, is anyone there?" My voice sounded weak and pathetic, a mere whisper in the vast emptiness. Just as panic threatened to overwhelm me, I saw it. A faint glow emanated from ahead, beckoning me forward like a beacon of hope. With renewed determination, I stumbled towards the light, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached the source of the light, I began to make out shapes in the shadows. My flashlight flickered back to life, revealing a sight that made my blood run cold. The water leak was coming from a broken pipe hidden behind a row of lockers. But it was what lay beyond the lockers that truly horrified me. The concrete floor was stained with what looked like blood. And, as I moved closer, I could make out handprints smeared in the same crimson substance across the wall. The handprints were small, like from a child. My skin crawled as I realized the implications of what I was seeing. This was no ordinary blood. It was the same blood that had seeped through the cracks in the wall and turned the concrete black. It was the blood of the patients who had been experimented on in Ward D and the handprints. They were the last desperate attempt of those poor souls to cling to life before they were taken away and never seen again. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, even though I had no reception down there. The screen lit up, revealing a single word spelled out in jagged, uneven letters. Run. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I turned to flee, but it was too late. Heavy footsteps echoed behind me, slow and deliberate, like someone dragging their feet. Turning slowly, I saw him. Standing in the doorway was a man dressed in an old-fashioned surgeon's coat. His face was covered with a cracked surgical mask, and his eyes glowed faintly through the darkness. But it wasn't just him. Behind him, dozens of pale, faceless figures crowded the hallway, reaching out their hands toward me. I turned and ran, blindly bumping into lockers and making my way deeper into the maze of corridors. Their footsteps echoed behind me, relentless and heavy, like a funeral procession. I could hear their whispers now, their voices raspy and distorted. Let me out. Let me out. I pounded on the lockers, hoping for an escape. But they were all locked, trapped and terrified. I collapsed against the cold concrete wall, tears streaming down my face. Help me! I cried out, my voice echoing through the darkness. But no one came. One had to get out of there. I didn't want to look back, but I couldn't help myself. I turned to see the man in the surgeon's coat standing in the doorway, his eyes boring into mine. He took a step forward and beckoned with a finger. I screamed and ran, not stopping until I reached the safety of the outside world. As I stood there catching my breath, I realized that I would never forget what I had seen and heard that night. The screams still echo in my dreams, a constant reminder of the horrors that lie beneath the surface. I will never forget the look on the supervisor's face, the urgency in his voice as he warned me to run. And I will never forget the sight of the man in the surgeon's coat, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness as he beckoned to me from the depths of Ward D. To this day, I still hear the screams echoing in my dreams. Screams that sound like they're still trapped down there, begging to be let out. Have you ever experienced anything supernatural while working at your job? If so, let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, make sure to subscribe for more scary stories just like this one. Now let's get into it. I used to work the overnight shift at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. Johns Hopkins is one of the most prestigious medical institutions in the world. It's known for cutting-edge research, groundbreaking technology, and a history that dates back over 100 years. But what people don't know is the dark undercurrent that runs through those massive halls. As someone who worked the graveyard shift, I became intimately familiar with the creepier parts of the hospital. In my time there, I heard many rumors about strange occurrences in the older sections of the building, particularly in the historic part of the hospital. This is where the original buildings from the 19th century still stand. Back then, it was considered state-of-the-art construction. But today, these parts of the hospital look more like a relic of the past than a place where modern medicine is practiced. The architecture is beautiful, but also creates some pretty creepy vibes. Labyrinth-like corridors with sharp turns and flickering fluorescent lights everywhere. Then there are the old wings that were supposed to have been shut down decades ago, but somehow still remain in use. Basements that most of the staff pretend don't exist! But it was in these very places that I would frequently find myself working alone late at night. It wasn't unusual for me to be the only person around for hours on end, which is not always the case at a hospital. There's always something going on, day or night. But there are certain areas that were basically abandoned after hours. On one particular night, I was assigned to cover an unusual patient transfer. We needed to move a woman from the intensive care unit all the way to the old surgical wing in the basement. I was told to meet the gurney downstairs in the tunnels connecting the two buildings. That's right, tunnels! I wheeled the patient down several flights of stairs, turned onto a narrow corridor that felt like it belonged in a horror movie. And then the temperature seemed to drop noticeably. The air grew heavy and still, making it hard to breathe. I pushed the gurney forward, trying to ignore the feeling that I was being watched. As I rounded a corner, I came face to face with a wall of lockers. Each one had a nameplate, but the engraving was so worn away that I couldn't read them. I felt a sudden urge to turn back, but I knew I shouldn't. So I continued on. The tunnel opened up into a large, high-ceilinged chamber, the walls lined with thick pipes. It looked like a cross between a boiler room and an old subway station. In the center of the room was a staircase spiraling down into darkness. I approached it cautiously, wondering why I hadn't been told about this before. What was this place? And what was I doing here? I took a deep breath and started to descend. Each step was cold and damp beneath my feet, and the air grew colder the deeper I went. I couldn't see anything in the gloom, but I could hear the sound of dripping water echoing around me. It felt like hours, though it must have only been minutes. I reached the bottom of the stairs and found myself in a place that seemed straight out of a horror movie. I'm not sure if it was what I saw or how I felt, but something inside me snapped. I dropped the clipboard I was holding and ran. I can still remember the sound of my own panicked breathing, the scrape of my shoes on the concrete floor. I didn't stop running until I burst out into the relative safety of the emergency room. When I finally got my breath back, I tried to make sense of what had happened. How did I get there? Why was I there? The other nurses and doctors didn't seem to know any more than I did. They exchanged worried glances, but no one could answer my questions. So I gave up and went home. But the next night, the same thing happened. I was drawn back to the same place in my dreams. I could feel the icy grip of fear as I descended the stairs into the unknown. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to go back. It was like a magnet pulling me in. I didn't want to, but I couldn't resist. Back at the hospital, I felt compelled to explore further. I walked the deserted hallways, peering into darkened rooms. Where had those patients been taken? What was this place? I discovered a hidden stairwell leading down to a floor that was marked off limits to everyone except authorized personnel. Curiosity and morbid fascination got the better of me. I went down the stairs. The air grew instantly colder, and a strange smell hung in the air, like old blood and decay. I stepped onto the floor and realized it was completely deserted. No patients, no medical staff, no one. I explored further, finding doors with faded signs above them that read pathology and autopsy. I could feel eyes boring into my back, watching my every move. I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy, as if anchored to the spot. I wandered into a large room with high ceilings and spotted a gurney in the corner. It was covered in a white sheet, but I could see the outline of something underneath. I hesitated, then pulled back the sheet. Lying on the gurney was a skeleton, dressed in what looked like old hospital scrubs. It was clear that this was no ordinary skeleton. Whoever this person was, they had been strapped down and experimented on. I could see the scars on their bones, and that's when I heard a voice behind me. Who's there? I froze, my heart pounding. I slowly turned to face the voice. Who said that? I whispered, my voice echoing in the vast room. There was no reply, only the sound of my own ragged breathing. But I knew I wasn't alone. Something else was in that room with me. I tried to call out for help, but my voice caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet. I fell to the ground, scraping my hands and knees. But I didn't care. One had to get out of there. I scrambled to my feet and ran, crashing through doors, stumbling over equipment. Finally, I burst out into the hallway. I don't remember how long I stayed in that place, but when I finally made it back upstairs, everyone swore I had been missing for 6 hours. They were frantic, calling my name, searching for me everywhere. I couldn't believe it. How could I have been gone for so long? I tried to explain what had happened, but no one believed me. They thought I was overworked and stressed out, having some sort of psychotic episode. They sent me home, but I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew what I had seen and felt. I couldn't bring myself to go back to that hospital. I quit the next day, unable to bear the thought of returning to those dark, dank corridors and the things that lurked within them. But sometimes, even years later, I have nightmares about that place. I dream of icy hallways and shadowy figures, of whispers in the dark, and the feeling of unseen eyes upon me. What's worse, when I try to tell people about it, they always laugh. They say it's just a hospital, that there's nothing dangerous about it. But I know better. I know that there are some places that are best left undisturbed, some secrets that are better left buried in the past. And now you're probably wondering why the hospital still stands and what happened to those poor patients. Well, it's because there's money to be made. The hospital board knew about the experiments going on down there, but they turned a blind eye. They didn't want to know any more than they had to. After all, those patients were expendable. They were just lab rats to them. And as for the poor patients, well, some were released once their usefulness had come to an end. But most of them never saw the light of day again. They died down there in those dark, dank rooms, forgotten and alone. But their souls, they never left. They're still trapped in that hospital, along with the spirits of those doctors and nurses who carried out their horrific experiments. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a like. Also, if you have a scary story you want to share, submit it to our website and you might just see your story become one of ours. Anyway, thank you for watching and have a good night.